When Emily turned 52 and finalized her divorce, something extraordinary happened. Something that forever changed the way men perceived her. For the first time in her life, she stopped chasing. She stopped trying to please. She stopped molding herself to male expectations. And it was precisely at that moment that she became irresistible. What Nilda Chiaraviglio discovered, studying cases like Emily's, goes against everything society teaches women about relationships. Prepare to uncover the magnetic power that only a mature woman possesses. If you're a woman over 40 and you feel you've lost your allure, that men prefer younger women, that you can no longer spark genuine desire, you need to understand that you're looking at it from completely the wrong angle. What you consider a disadvantage is actually your greatest asset. Emily discovered this in the most surprising way possible. For 22 years of marriage, Emily had always been the perfect wife. He would wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare the coffee he liked. She organized his social calendar, cooked his favorite dishes, read his expressions to anticipate his needs. When he came home from work in a bad mood, she would modify the entire energy of the house. If he wanted to watch football, she feigned interest. If he criticized her outfit, she changed it immediately. 22 years, molding herself, adapting, chasing after approval. The divorce was devastating. At 52, Emily found herself alone, with shattered self-esteem, thinking her love life was over. That's when a friend sent her a video of Nilda Chiaraviglio on the magnetism of mature women. Nilda explained something revolutionary that men confessed in anonymous surveys. They feel more intensely attracted to women who don't need them to be complete. Emily's first reaction was disbelief. How could she not need them? She had spent decades believing that her value lay in being indispensable. But something in Nilda's explanation made sense. The psychologist revealed that there's a fundamental difference between the energy of a young woman who is still discovering herself and the energy of a mature woman who has already found herself. Emily decided to experiment when Richard, a 48-year-old co-worker, started showing interest. He did something completely different than she would have done before. Instead of being available when he called, she waited until the next day to return the call. When he suggested dates, she checked her schedule and sometimes said she already had commitments. When he complimented her on something, she simply thanked him without trying to please him further or justify herself. The transformation was immediate and confusing for Richard. He was used to women who rearranged their schedules for him, who canceled plans when he showed up, who made him the center of their lives. Emily did none of that. She had her Pilates routine, her friends, her personal projects, her complete and interesting life. And the more she demonstrated this independence, the more he became interested. Nilda Chiaraviglio teaches that this happens because the male brain is programmed to value what is scarce, what needs to be conquered. A mature woman who has already built her identity, who has her own interests, who doesn't desperately seek male attention, represents a much more interesting challenge than someone who gives herself completely. On the first date, the turning point happened on a Friday. Richard called at 5 in the afternoon, suggesting dinner that same day. The old Emily would have canceled any plans to be available. But the new Emily, influenced by Nilda's teachings, responded calmly, "That's a shame, Richard. I already have plans for today." Maybe next week," and hung up. Richard was surprised. He wasn't used to hearing no from a woman. He spent the entire weekend thinking about her, imagining what she was doing, who she was with. On Monday, he called again, this time planning a special date in advance for the following Thursday. And Emily responded, "I'll check my schedule and let you know." And she really checked, as if his invitation were just another option in her life. What Nilda explains is that the mature woman possesses something that no young woman has, the ability of not to need external validation to feel complete. When you've already been through relationships, raised children, built a career, faced difficulties, and survived, you develop an internal solidity that is extremely attractive. During the dates, Emily didn't try to impress Richard. She didn't modify her opinions to please him, didn't pretend to like things she didn't like, didn't diminish herself so that he would feel bigger. She was simply herself, with her experiences, her scars, her wisdom, and that created a dynamic completely different from what Richard was used to. The change in his behavior was gradual but visible. In the beginning, he tried to use the strategies that worked with younger women: excessive charm, expensive gifts, promises of exclusivity. But Emily received everything with elegance and without getting flustered. She thanked him for the gifts, but didn't feel indebted. She appreciated the charm, but didn't melt. She listened to the promises, but didn't depend on them to be happy. That's when Richard realized he was dealing with a woman unlike any he had met before. A woman who wasn't desperate to please, who didn't modify her personality to win approval, who had her own life and genuine interests. And that left him fascinated. Nilda Chiaraviglio reveals that there is a specific psychology behind this attraction. Mature men, especially those who have already had relationships with younger women, begin to value different things. They get tired of having to be the center of someone's life, of carrying the weight, of being the partner's only source of happiness. A woman who already has her life built, who is interesting in herself, who doesn't need him to be complete, represents a relief, and at the same time, an irresistible challenge. Emily began to notice subtle changes in Richard's behavior. He started calling more frequently, not just to make dates, but to find out how she was, to share things from his day. He started including her in plans with his friends, introduced her to his family, suggested trips, and most interestingly, he began to strive to impress her, something he had never done with other women. The secret, according to Nilda, lies in what she calls strategic indifference. It's not coldness or disinterest, but rather a posture of someone who has self-worth and doesn't negotiate that worth for male attention. It's the difference between being available out of desperation and being available by choice. One day, Richard arrived at Emily's apartment, visibly agitated. She greeted him as always, calm and welcoming, but without any eagerness to hear what he wanted to say. He explained that he'd ended a 2-year relationship with a 29-year-old woman to be completely free to build something serious with her. Emily listened, thanked him for his sincerity, but her reaction wasn't one of euphoria. She simply said, "I'm glad you made a decision that brings you peace. Let's see how things develop naturally." This response only intensified Richard's fascination. He expected her to be thrilled, to celebrate, to immediately want to make things official. But Emily reacted like a woman who already knew her worth and didn't need his validation to feel special. She was genuinely interested in getting to know him better, but her happiness didn't depend on this relationship. Nilda teaches that this is the fundamental difference between the power of a young woman and the magnetic power of a mature woman. A young woman often uses her beauty and availability to attract. The mature woman uses her completeness and independence. The young woman often competes for attention. The mature woman simply exists in her natural magnificence. The following months revealed something extraordinary. Richard became the most attentive and devoted partner Emily had ever had. He constantly strived to win her attention, to earn her time, to be worthy of her. He brought flowers for no special reason, planned romantic surprises, and presented future plans. And most impressively, he never took her presence for granted. He treated the relationship as a privilege, not an entitlement. What shifted in the dynamic was that Emily had grasped a fundamental principle that Nilda always teaches. Men value what they must continually earn. When a woman gives herself completely too soon, when she reorganizes her entire life around him, when she demonstrates that he's more important than herself, she inadvertently removes the challenge and, consequently, the interest. Emily never canceled her plans to be available for Richard. If he showed up unannounced, she welcomed him warmly, but didn't change her routine. If he wanted to go out to dinner and she had planned a quiet night at home, she'd say, "That's a lovely idea. Let's plan for tomorrow." And she genuinely stayed home, taking care of herself, without guilt or anxiety. This stance created a dynamic where Richard needed to organize himself to deserve Emily's time. He learned to call ahead to schedule dates, to respect her commitments, to value the moments they spent together, because he knew he couldn't take them for granted. The interesting thing is that Emily wasn't doing this as a manipulative strategy. She had genuinely rediscovered the joy of having her own life, her own interests, her own routine. She had reconnected with friends, resumed hobbies she'd abandoned during her marriage, and invested in her professional growth. She was being authentic, and that authenticity was irresistible. Nilda Chiaraviglio explains that this is the true power of a mature woman. She doesn't need to pretend to be interesting, because she is interesting. She doesn't need to pretend to have her own life, because she has her own life. She doesn't need to pretend to be independent, because she is independent. And that authenticity is something no young woman can imitate, because it only comes with life experience. Richard confessed to Emily months later that he had never felt so attracted to a woman. He said that what fascinated him most about her was her ability to be happy alone, to have her own opinions, to not need his approval to make decisions. He confessed that this made him want to be the best version of himself, to deserve to be by her side. This confession revealed something that Nilda always teaches. Mature men are attracted to women who raise their standard, who inspire them to grow, who don't accept just any behavior just to avoid being alone. A woman with solid self-esteem automatically demands a higher level of treatment, and men of worth respond positively to that demand. Emily realized that she had spent decades trying to be the perfect woman for others, when she should have focused on being the best version of herself. At 52, she finally understood that her value didn't depend on how much she sacrificed for a relationship, but on how much she respected and valued herself. The transformation was so remarkable that Emily's friends began to ask for advice. They saw how she had changed, how radiant she was, how Richard treated her with a respect and admiration that their ex-husbands had never shown. Emily always credited Nilda's teachings about the magnetic power of the mature woman, what Emily learned, and what Nilda always teaches, is that there's a fundamental difference between being loved for who you pretend to be and being loved for who you really are. During her marriage, Emily was loved for the adapted version of herself, for the woman who molded herself to her husband's needs. With Richard, she was loved for her authenticity, for her strength, for her independence. This change didn't happen overnight. Emily needed to unlearn decades of social conditioning that taught her that a woman's value lay in being useful, available, adaptable. She needed to rediscover who she was when she wasn't trying to please anyone. She needed to reconnect with her dreams, her interests, her genuine opinions. The process involved moments of anxiety. When Richard was slow to return a call, the old Emily wanted to call again, send messages, make sure she hadn't done anything wrong. But the new Emily took a deep breath, remembered Nilda's teachings, and went on with her life. If he called, great. If he didn't call, she would continue to be happy. This posture created a completely different dynamic. Richard learned that Emily wasn't there out of desperation or neediness, but by choice. And that made all the difference in the value he placed on the relationship. He knew he needed to earn her presence every day. That he couldn't take it for granted that she would be there, regardless of how he treated her. Nilda teaches that this is the essence of mature magnetism, the ability to be in a relationship by choice, not by need. When a woman has already built her life, has already developed her identity, has already learned to be happy alone, she enters relationships as a complete person who is choosing to share her completeness with someone special. Emily discovered that her true beauty wasn't in trying to look younger or compete with women in their 20s. Her beauty resided in her wisdom, in her serenity, in her ability to love without losing herself, to give without obliterating herself. She had cultivated an emotional elegance that only comes with maturity. The relationship between Emily and Richard deepened in a way she had never experienced before. There were no emotional games, no manipulation, no attempts at control. There were two mature adults who respected each other and chose to be together because they added value to each other's lives. Richard started talking about the future, about plans together, about how he wanted to build something lasting with her. But this time, Emily didn't get lost in romantic fantasies or start planning a wedding. She simply appreciated his intention and kept her focus on the present, on what they were building, day after day. This mature stance created a solid foundation for their relationship. There was no pressure, no unrealistic expectations, no rush to define a status. There were two people who genuinely knew each other, respected each other deeply, and built intimacy based on real compatibility, not emotional neediness. If you're watching this video and relate to Emily's journey, use the super thanks to show you're also ready to discover your mature, magnetic power. Each super thanks helps more women understand that their maturity isn't a limitation, but their greatest strength. Emily's story reveals something Nilda always teaches. After 40, you have the opportunity to relate in a completely new way. You no longer need to prove yourself, diminish yourself, or mold yourself to be loved. You can simply be who you are in all your mature magnificence and attract someone who loves exactly that authentic version of you. The power of the mature woman isn't in competing with younger women on their own terms. It's in recognizing that you possess something unique and valuable that only comes with experience. The ability to love without losing yourself, to give without obliterating yourself, to be a partner without ceasing to be yourself. Emily understands now that her 52 years aren't an obstacle to love, but the perfect age to truly love. She knows who she is, what she wants, what she accepts, and what she doesn't accept. And that clarity is extremely attractive to mature men who also know how to value a woman of substance. Emily's transformation proves that it's never too late to rediscover your feminine power. It doesn't matter how old you are, or how many relationships haven't worked out. If you're willing to stop chasing after and start valuing who you really are, you'll discover a magnetism that no young woman can imitate. What happened to Emily wasn't luck or chance. It was the conscious application of the principles that Nilda Chiaraviglio teaches about mature female psychology. When a woman understands that her completeness is her greatest attraction, that her independence is her greatest seduction, that her authenticity is her greatest power, she becomes magnetically irresistible. Richard now confesses to his friends that Emily is the most fascinating woman he's ever met. He says he never knows exactly what to expect from her because she's unpredictable in a mature and intriguing way. She isn't unpredictable because she's unstable, but because she's genuine and doesn't mold herself to his expectations. This constant authenticity keeps his interest always piqued. Emily learned that true feminine power isn't in being needed, but in being desired. It isn't in being indispensable, but in being unforgettable. It isn't in chasing after, but in being pursued. And all this happened when she stopped trying to be what she thought men wanted and started being simply who she was. Their relationship today is an example of how two mature adults can build something solid based on mutual respect and genuine admiration. Richard values Emily not only as a romantic partner, but as a person, as a woman, as a complete individual. And Emily values Richard the same way. Without the need for control or possession, Nilda teaches that this is the difference between mature love and young passion. Mature love is based on conscious choice, mutual respect, and joint growth. There's no emotional dependence, no power games, no attempts to change the other. There's acceptance, admiration, and a desire to build something beautiful together. Emily's story spread among her friends, and many started to question their own relationship patterns. They saw how Emily had transformed, how she was more confident, more radiant, happier, and mainly, they saw how Richard treated her with a respect and adoration that they had never experienced. One of Emily's friends, Sarah, 47, decided to apply the same principles to her 18-year marriage. She stopped chasing after her husband to solve all the problems at home, stopped anticipating all his needs, stopped taking responsibility for his happiness, and started investing time in herself, in her interests, in her friendships. The change in Sarah's husband's behavior was gradual but significant. He started trying harder to earn her attention, started valuing the moments they spent together, started treating her with more respect and consideration. The relationship, which had fallen into a routine, gained a new dynamic, a new energy. Another friend, Michelle, 55, applied Nilda's teachings to her single life. She stopped accepting any invitation just to avoid being alone, stopped adapting to the schedules and preferences of the men who asked her out, stopped pretending to like things she didn't like, and started having much more interesting and respectful dates. What all these women discovered is that Nilda was right. The power of the mature woman is in her completeness, not in her availability. It's in her authenticity, not in her adaptability. It's in her choice, not in her need. Emily now gives informal talks to groups of women about mature relationships. She always emphasizes that it's not about playing hard to get or manipulating men. It's about rediscovering who you really are when you're not trying to please anyone and valuing that authentic version of yourself. She teaches that the first step is to stop chasing after external validation. Stop modifying your schedule to be available whenever he wants. Stop sacrificing your interests for his interests. Stop pretending to be someone you're not to maintain a relationship. The second step is to rediscover your own interests, your own opinions, your own dreams. Many women have spent so many years focused on pleasing others that they've lost touch with who they really are. Emily spent months rediscovering what her genuine tastes were, her favorite hobbies, her personal aspirations. The third step is to create and maintain a rich and interesting life, independent of any relationship. Have girlfriends, pursue hobbies, work on projects, chase your dreams. Be a complete person who is choosing to share her completeness with someone special, not someone incomplete, looking for someone to fill a void. Emily always ends her conversations with other women by saying, "You don't need to compete with anyone because you are unique. You don't need to pretend to be younger because your maturity is your edge. You don't need to go chasing after anyone because whoever is meant to be in your life will recognize your worth and make the effort to deserve your presence." Emily and Richard's relationship continues to flourish 2 years after their first meeting. They travel together. They have projects in common. They support each other, but they maintain their individualities. Neither has lost their identity in the relationship. They have both grown, as individuals and as partners. Richard often says that Emily taught him what it is to love a real woman. It's not about possessing, controlling, or molding. It's about admiring, respecting, and supporting. It's about being beside someone who chooses to be with you every day, not out of need, but out of genuine desire. Emily discovered that at 52. She was at the best time of her life to love and be loved, not because she had become perfect, but because she had become authentic, not because she no longer had problems, but because she had learned to deal with them without losing herself in the process. Emily's transformation is proof that Nilda's teachings on the allure of the mature woman are not just theory, but an applicable reality. When a woman understands her worth, when she stops chasing after and starts choosing, when she stops conforming and starts being authentic, she becomes irresistible in a way that transcends age, physical appearance, or social status. If you've made it this far in the video, it's because something resonates with your experience. Maybe you identify with the Emily at the beginning of the story, always chasing after, always trying to please. Or maybe you identify with the transformed Emily, who discovered her magnetic power. In any case, use the comments to share what insight most touched you and how you intend to apply these teachings in your life. Your experience can inspire another woman to discover her own power. What Nilda Chiaraviglio teaches, through cases like Emily's, isn't about manipulation or psychological games. It's about a profound and genuine transformation that happens when a woman reconnects with her essence, with her intrinsic value, with her natural completeness. It's about stopping to look outside for what already exists within. Emily today is an informal mentor to many women who are going through the same transformation. She always emphasizes that the most important change was not in Richard's behavior, but in the perception she had of herself. When she stopped seeing herself as someone who needed to be chosen and started seeing herself as someone who chooses, the entire dynamic of her relationships changed. The psychology behind this transformation is fascinating, and it's documented in the studies that Nilda frequently cites. Men are naturally attracted to what represents challenge, mystery, and perceived value. A woman who has already built her life, who has her own interests, who is not desperate for validation, automatically represents all of that. Think of it like this. It's the fear scarce resource principle. Like a limited edition painting. Its value goes up because everyone wants it. But it's hard to get. But the most important thing is that this attraction is sustainable because it is based on authenticity. Emily wasn't pretending to be independent or interesting. She genuinely had rediscovered those aspects of herself. That's why the relationship with Richard continues to be solid 2 years later. There was no mask to fall, because there was no mask from the beginning. The legacy of Emily's transformation goes beyond her relationship with Richard, her girlfriends, her co-workers, even her adult daughters. All noticed the radical change in her energy, her confidence, her presence. She has become a living inspiration of what it means to embrace maturity as power, not as limitation. Today, Emily advises women who are going through divorces, separations, or simply questioning their relationship patterns. She always says that the most liberating moment of her life was when she stopped trying to be the perfect woman for others and started being the authentic version of herself. Emily's message, echoing the teachings of Nilda, is clear. Your age is not your enemy, it's your ally. Your experience is not baggage, it's wisdom. Your independence is not loneliness, it's completeness. And when you embrace all of that, you become magnetically irresistible to those who truly deserve to be in your life. The power of the mature woman lies precisely in not needing power to feel powerful. It lies in not needing validation to feel valuable. It lies in not needing to chase to be pursued. And Emily is living proof that this transformation is possible for any woman willing to rediscover who she really is.